We'll start this with your experience being detained by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol at Chicago O'Hare. Now, I've obviously seen some of your streams about it, and I know you've done a couple media appearances regarding this experience or this episode being detained. Now that you've had some time to reflect on the experience and maybe you've been able to speak with other journalists and lawyers about it, I'd like to ask, do you have anything more to say about the situation than what your initial reaction to it was? Has maybe your analysis of the episode changed at all over the last few days?
Not necessarily. I guess the only thing that was really interesting was the Department of Homeland Security's spokesperson's response to it all,
Mhm.
which was to claim that this was like lying for likes and that it was a routine part of the process, a routine investigation that was not conducted on the basis or was not started on the basis of like political dissidents, and that they released me after asking these questions, and I find that interesting because on the one hand, I think that they're still lying.
Mhm.
Obviously, I don't think that they're being truthful when they say it's not targeting due to political opinions. But I think it's also interesting that they are worried about that being branded with that being associated with the administration. Like they're worried that that could be an angle of attack or an angle of criticism that could galvanize a lot of people against the administration. So it's interesting what they chose to defend and what they chose to omit. And what they chose to omit, of course, is the line of questioning, because I think that's what most people are understandably disturbed by. My political affiliations, my opinions on American foreign policy, my opinions on Israel, and numerous non-state actors that are in the region. That all of that is constitutionally protected speech for an American citizen such as myself. And yet, these were questions that were asked almost to feed a line of inquiry that could potentially create some kind of actionable situation. In an effort to like trip you up in that conversation to try to see if you could uh, uh, say something that could justify further investigation into whether or not you are doing something illegal, like material support for any number of these different groups. And so that in and of itself was a frustrating thing to contend with, that the administration is trying to do this. But I guess, like I said, the silver lining is that they are still worried about the bad branding that this brings, the bad attention that this brings upon the Department of Homeland Security. Um, so those are my thoughts since the detention.
Mm, I understand in that same comment, I believe it's Trisha McLaughlin, she had said that what had happened to you was legal. What do you make of that?
I think it's definitely very strange if this is now considered legal and routine. Because not only did she say it's legal, but she also said it was a routine investigation. And I don't know if it's actually routine or if it should be routine to ask American travelers entering the country what their opinion on the president is. Would it have been fine if I don't know, Rush Limbaugh was apprehended during the Bill Clinton administration at the border? I mean, I don't even know if Tucker Carlson was questioned or investigated by the Department of Homeland Security or any other agency under the Biden administration when he went and talked to Vladimir Putin,
Mhm.
the leader of a foreign adversary. Uh, so I don't think this is routine at all. I mean, it's routine if you are Muslim living in the post 9/11 war on terror era where you're traveling at all. And I have seen some of that impact as well, like getting four S's on my getting the quadruple S stamp on my boarding pass. Like I've experienced that before, right? For additional security clearances and things of that nature. But this was unique in the sense that like I've never been taken to a detention center and like been investigated this thoroughly with questions that revolve around things that they're not even supposed to technically ask you when you are entering the country, like your opinion on the president. is not pertinent to entering the country as an American citizen. It is unconstitutional for them to bar me entry into my own country on the basis of my First Amendment protected speech.
Right. And actually, in that actually blends pretty well with my next question. Now, in light of this event, it's my understanding you've accused the US government of causing a chilling effect and an environment of fear through these detainments, not just
Yeah.
yours, but as well as others, in an effect or an effort to silence critics. So I'd like to ask, why do you think the US government might view your speech or your political activity as dangerous to its prerogatives and perhaps especially in regards to its foreign policy goals and objectives?
Because it's deeply unpopular. It's that simple. Our agenda in the Middle East, our grand design for the region, revolves around Israel dominating every other country in its immediate vicinity with American munitions. And the atrocities are so severe that it has actually changed the political calculation and the way that people view Israel, no longer as the most reliable and most valuable ally in the Middle East, the only moral country in the Middle East, the only moral democracy in the Middle East, as people previously saw Israel as, but instead now as an apartheid state that is doing a genocide, which is the truth. That is what Israel is, and that is what Israel is doing. And they're only able to do so with our weapons and with our political cover at the international stage. This has created a major fissure between what the American public's demands are, which I believe are very reasonable and just, which is to put an end to this bloodshed and to also bring about war criminals that are responsible for this genocide to justice, right? And the American politicians, on the other hand, the American government, on the other hand, has a very different attitude on this, a very different attitude that revolves around letting Israel continue doing what it wants to do. And for this reason, I think, and this accelerated under the Biden administration as well, something I was very critical about even then. Um, the government's response to this has been to basically try and punish people for not liking what Israel is doing, rather than address the elephant in the room. The idea that this can continue forever is ridiculous, and that's where we're at now. That's why we are seeing, first from an immigration enforcement side, which is, I think, also deliberate, because that was Trump's most popular policy in his mind, at least. We're seeing the immigrant enforcement mechanism target student protesters and even green card holders for no crimes whatsoever, but simply for their First Amendment protected speech, uh, in an effort to, I think, open the door to a complete erosion of the First Amendment, and maybe even possibly uh, another unconstitutional precedent to set on a distinction being made in terms of constitutional protections between citizens and non-citizens. Because right now there is no distinction. The Constitution protects citizens and non-citizens alike as long as they're on U.S. soil, which means that they're still also protected by the First Amendment. I think that that's what they're trying to tackle right now, and I fear that they're using Israel, which has a tremendously sophisticated and very expansive and also expensive lobbying and influence peddling operation in the United States of America, and the cynical shield that this influence peddling operation uses is anti-Semitism. That this administration is using anti-Semitism as a way to open up the floodgates of eroding civil liberties, and they're doing this in a very cynical and very transparent manner.
Right. Now, in that respect, right. I mean, if our ability to speak out as civilians in this capacity is being jeopardized, what should we try to be doing right now to prevent that? What is our action in terms of where we go from here now that that seems to possibly be the target?
I mean, I think we just keep pushing. There's nothing else to do in this situation. You can change targets as the government changes its priorities, or engages in ridiculous enforcement and further encroachments on civil liberties. But before that happens, as long as there are legal avenues that you can exhaust, I think we should exhaust all avenues and all options and engage in civil disobedience and continue to speak truth to power and exercise our First Amendment rights, especially as American citizens. I have immense privilege as an American citizen that is relatively wealthy, and as an American citizen with a public persona. And I try to use that privilege every single day to speak out for those who can't speak out for themselves, to give voice to the voiceless. And I'm going to continue doing that regardless of whether or not the government doesn't like it, or whether or not the government wants to prosecute me over these sorts of things, when previously it would have been seen as unimaginable to prosecute an American citizen over their constitutionally protected speech.
Right. Um, I suppose in this respect, I'd like to pivot a little bit, especially in relation to Israel's war on Gaza. Now, I'm curious, what message do you have or might you have to those on the political right who have been making free speech, let's say, a focal point of their political activity over the years, that may be sympathetic to your positions on Israel? Do you think that maybe this incident, this detainment, could create an opportunity for some left-right alliance on these issues?
Maybe I haven't seen too much from the right coming out and speaking out against this. I've only seen celebrations from centrists, sometimes liberals, and many right wingers who demand even more than what has taken place, who say either that it did not happen, despite the reality that the Department of Homeland Security admitted that it did,
Mhm.
or if it happened, it wasn't that bad. And if it wasn't that bad, you actually deserve worse. You deserve more than what took place. So that's what I've been seeing on the internet. So I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm too hopeful. Um, I think for a lot of people, their understanding of the First Amendment is not necessarily the government using its awesome power to compel speech or to stop certain kinds of speech from happening, but instead it is actually to be able to say slurs and then not see any repercussions from people around you for said action. And that's a misunderstanding of the First Amendment. And it's not how things work. I mean, this would be a violation, as opposed to people yelling at you because you said something horrific.
Mhm. No, entirely, it is a violation. I suppose I have a more specific question regarding the detainment. Have you heard of the Zionist group called Bitar? For
Yes.
reference, okay, yeah. Obviously, it's shared. It says it's shared a list of names of hundreds of terror supporters with the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe there's a chance that you've been the target of this group, considering your views on Israel Gaza?
Um. Potentially, but it's not. We don't have to look that far. I mean, I've been almost declared the number one anti-Semite of the year by StopAntisemitism.org. I've been targeted by the ADL on numerous occasions. So there are much more prominent advocacy institutions, not even Stop Antisemitism, but ADL being like probably the most the largest and the most influential one with institutional muscle, coming after me with regular frequency, and with vicious smears of anti-Semitism, when I have been a a massive combatter of anti-Semitism in perpetuity. It's just that I am also an anti-Zionist, and that is very frustrating for a lot of these organizations that simply care about Israel and not necessarily about anti-Semitism at all. Um, so there's a number of different groups that could have put me in the crosshairs of this administration. There's also obviously alongside this like sophisticated influence peddling operation, there are papers that will routinely write hit pieces at times when I'm getting any sort of media coverage that's somewhat positive. You got the free presses of the world
Mhm.
that very obviously are just doing propaganda for Israel with regular frequency. You have the New York Post of the world, like these right wing newspapers. Sometimes Fox News will even entertain writing, counter messaging. This happened after my New York Times article came out. There was in the Sunday Style section, they wrote about the appeal that I have, I guess, for young men, and this went viral among right wing circles, and very quickly, uh, uh, as it happens over and over again, all of these are institutions that I was talking about, all of these like right wing papers that I was talking about started immediately writing counter articles, being like, "This guy's a terrorist supporter. He loves terrorism," and you know, I feel like broadly in the eyes of the broader public, that kind of stuff doesn't work anymore. Like
Mhm.
no one really cares about it that much. Everyone's like, oh, here we go, another person who is pro Palestine is being branded as an anti-Semite again, and I feel like that has kind of softened the impact, but it's it's obvious to me that the government certainly takes note of these things.
Mhm.
So
Right.
that's something to consider.
Right. I suppose moving forward, I'd like to pivot a little bit more onto your general foreign policy positions in relation to the Trump administration. Now, I understand that when talking about your detention experience, you had said that you told the CPB agent that you were upset that Trump hasn't ended the wars. And obviously, that's definitely true in relation to Israel Gaza. Now, Trump has made certain efforts to try to move to end the war in Ukraine, and he's also made certain efforts to, negotiate with Iran as well as Yemen's Houthis. I'm curious, what do you think about Trump's efforts in these other realms? Do you support some of his other foreign policy efforts?
Yeah, I actually mentioned the Houthis
Mhm.
specifically in my interrogation as well, where I said like, look, there are certain things that Trump does that I think are considered unorthodox from a foreign policy perspective in comparison to previous administrations that I actually appreciate. And the one that immediately came to mind was the talks that took place in Oman over cessation of hostilities between the Ansar Allah movement and the Trump administration, and I think that that was productive.
Mhm.
Stopping the bombing of Sanaa, other numerous points in Yemen, and killing a bunch of civilians was not only costly. I believe what the total number is like $15 billion of munitions that have been
Mhm.
used so far in Yemen. It's more so than the war on terror. As a matter of fact, it's like totally ridiculous. um, I guess you could say it's irresponsible statecraft. And I said that I actually appreciated that he did that. So there are certain things that he does that I agree with, but the problem is that didn't come about exclusively because Trump is a peaceful dove. That came about because the Houthis were punishing the American Navy tremendously
Mhm.
with with very little that they have. Right, it's the poorest nation on the planet, and yet they were able to take down 22 Reaper drones that are what $20 million a pop, almost, or even more expensive than that, if I'm not mistaken. Four F-18 fighter jets were destroyed in the process. One under the Biden administration in the month of December, and then three, including uh, uh, the last one being destroyed the day of the ceasefire. I mean, those are $70 million a pop. There's a crazy amount of cost, and if you believe the New York Times reporting on this, they were claiming, or at least like sources were claiming that the Houthis were almost able to take down an F-16 and an F-35, seriously putting pilot lives at risk, and really changing the calculation for the Trump administration. So it's not necessarily that Trump was a peaceful dove, but at least he was reasonable enough to recognize that these guys are not going to stop, and at the very least, it's better to continue engaging in defensive posture for Israel, but let them do whatever they're doing to Israel, but also create this situation where there's no longer any sort of back and forth between the American Navy in the region and the Houthis.
Sure. I suppose to wrap this up, I'm just kind of curious more about not just your perspectives, but perhaps this perspectives broadly of you, the people who watch your streams. Would you say that their views broadly, these foreign policy views of your streamers, do you think they're being given a fair shake in Washington broadly? And if not, what does the road look like to make it so that there is that fair representation? I mean, it's my personal observation, for example, during the Biden administration, speak with a lot of people my age. I think, for example, there wasn't a lot of representation of like a pro-Palestine position in the Biden administration, for example. And I think if I'm speaking from personal perspective, I saw a lot of people just kind of check out, right? I'm curious kind of what you see amongst your own streamers or the people that follow your work regarding, do they feel their foreign policy views are being represented? What are their frustrations and how do we move forward with that?
No, I don't think the broader American foreign policy perspective is being represented, but I think that is also by design, kind of, where
Hmm.
Americans have the capacity to feel as though they want peace all the time, but that's only because a lot of our imperialist efforts are sheltered from the public, whether it be the damaging impact to the local populations or even migration patterns that end up out of all of the displacement, the migration patterns that end up causing destabilization in certain places like Europe.
Mhm.
Those issues never come all the way back to the United States of America and create political trouble in the United States of America. We are sheltered from the impact of our actions, and I think that the media broadly also keeps people uh, desensitized and either desensitized or utterly oblivious to American foreign policy, which is precisely the reason why both parties can engage in like full blown war hawk behavior all around the world, and even Trump can present himself as a peaceful dove, as a ender of wars, even though he also, when in charge, will greatly accelerate America's most damaging and most violent policies on the global stage. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that like Americans fancy themselves to be peaceful or want to feel peaceful and want to vote for a guy who says he's going to end the wars. But both parties are not really invested in that at all. At least Trump is lying about it when he's running for office, which I think is also still instructive to understand like what the public position is on this. But neither party actually represents it, and it's really damaging. It's we're completely servile to the interests of the military-industrial complex in this country. Our politicians are.
Right. Aspects of that have been pretty frustrating. I've been covering the military industrial complex myself for years, and a lot of it just tends to span, unfortunately, both left and right quite a lot of the time. Well, that was really all I had for you. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, thank you for having me, and keep up the great work.